The crisp air, the crunch of leaves under your boots, the stunning colors. There's nothing quite like a hike in the fall, but as the days get shorter and the woods grow quieter, things can take a turn for the strange, and sometimes the downright terrifying. Today, we're venturing into the deep woods to share 5 true, chilling stories from hikers who found more than just beautiful scenery on their autumn trails. These stories serve as a reminder that even on the most peaceful-looking path, you're never truly alone. So, grab a warm drink, get comfortable, and let's begin. Our first story comes from a hiker named Mark, who decided to take a solo trip through the Appalachian Mountains in late October. The foliage was at its peak, a sea of red and gold. As dusk began to settle, Mark realized he'd taken a wrong turn. The trail markers had vanished. He checked his phone, no signal. A familiar sense of unease started to creep in, but he tried to stay calm, telling himself he'd just backtrack. That's when he heard it. A faint whistling sound, carrying on the wind. It wasn't a bird, and it wasn't the wind itself. It was a tune, a simple, eerie melody that seemed to be coming from just beyond the next ridge. Mark called out, thinking maybe it was another lost hiker. The whistling stopped. He waited, listening to the silence of the woods. Then it started again. This time closer. He couldn't make out any words, just the same haunting tune. Every time he moved, the whistling would stop and then start again, always seeming to be just a little bit nearer. He never saw who or what was making the sound. He spent a terrifying night huddled under a rock ledge, listening to the melody circle his position until the first light of dawn. When the sun came up, the whistling was gone. He found the main trail within an hour and never looked back. He says he can still hear that tune in his quietest moments, a chilling reminder of his night in the mountains. Next, we have a story from a couple, Chloe and Ben, who are hiking in a national forest in Oregon. It was a beautiful, clear autumn day, perfect for capturing photos of the vibrant landscape. They were on a well-marked loop trail, about halfway through their hike, when they noticed something odd. Tucked into the hollow of a large, ancient-looking tree was a small, hand-carved wooden doll. It was crude, with button eyes and yarn for hair. But what was unsettling was its expression, a wide, unnatural smile. Chloe thought it was a geocache, or some kind of trail art, and took a photo. They continued on, but a few hundred yards later, they found another one, identical to the first, placed carefully on a moss-covered rock. Now they were a bit creeped out. Over the next mile, they found 5 more dolls, each one placed in a more conspicuous spot than the last. The final doll was sitting right in the middle of the path, forcing them to stop. This time, its button eyes seemed to be staring directly at them. The sun was beginning to set, casting long, distorted shadows through the trees. A sudden feeling of being watched washed over them. They didn't see anyone, but the woods, which had been filled with the sounds of birds and squirrels just an hour before, were now completely silent. They quickly turned around and practically ran the entire way back to their car, not daring to look behind them. They never found out who was leaving the dolls, or why, but they said the smiling faces of those little figures haunted their dreams for weeks. Our third story takes place in the remote backcountry of Colorado. A group of 4 friends set out for a weekend camping trip in early November. They were experienced hikers, well-equipped for the cold. The first day was uneventful. They set up camp by a pristine alpine lake, surrounded by snow-dusted peaks. As night fell, the temperature plummeted. They were sitting around their campfire, sharing stories, when they heard a sound from the other side of the lake. It was a scream, but it wasn't human. It was high-pitched and guttural, a sound of pure agony that echoed across the valley. The friends froze, their campfire chatter dying instantly. They scanned the opposite shore with their headlamps, but saw nothing but dark trees. They tried to reason it away, maybe it was a mountain lion or a fox, but none of them had ever heard an animal make a sound so full of pain and despair. A few minutes later, it happened again, closer this time. It sounded like something was in distress, and it was moving along the shoreline toward their camp. They grabbed their bear spray and stood back to back, shining their lights into the oppressive darkness. The screaming continued, sporadically, for almost an hour, each cry sounding nearer than the last. It felt like it was circling them, just outside the ring of their firelight. Then, as suddenly as it started, it stopped. The rest of the night was spent in tense silence, with no one getting any sleep. They packed up and hiked out at first light, the memory of those horrifying screams chasing them all the way back to civilization. This next account comes from a woman named Sarah, who was trail running with her dog, Busta, on a crisp autumn morning in a state park she knew like the back of her hand. They were on a familiar path when Buster, usually a happy-go-lucky golden retriever, suddenly stopped dead. His ears went back, the fur on his neck stood on end, and he let out a low, menacing growl at something in the trees off the trail. Sarah couldn't see anything. She tried to coax him along, but he wouldn't budge. He just stood there, staring intently into the dense woods. Thinking it might be a deer or a coyote, Sarah started making noise, clapping her hands and calling out. That's when she saw it. For just a split second, she saw a tall, unnaturally thin figure moving between two trees, about 50 yards away. It was dark, almost blending in with the shadows, and it moved with a strange, jerky gait that wasn't human or animal. Eat was Terry. And then it was gone. Buster started barking frantically. An overwhelming sense of dread washed over Sarah. She grabbed Buster's collar and turned, running back the way she came, her heart pounding in her chest. She didn't stop running until they were back in the crowded parking lot. She never saw the figure again, but she says she'll never forget the feeling of pure, primal fear, or the way her dog, her brave protector, was so clearly terrified of what was hiding in those woods. For our final story, we go to the misty mountains of North Carolina. A hiker named David was attempting a challenging day hike in the Pisgah National Forest. It was late fall, and a thick fog had rolled in, reducing visibility to just a few feet. He was relying on his GPS to navigate. He was deep in the woods when his GPS suddenly died. Annoyed but not panicked, he decided to wait for the fog to lift a bit. As he stood there, surrounded by the muffled silence, he heard a soft rustling in the leaves nearby. He called out, "Hello," thinking it was another hiker. There was no reply. The rustling stopped. A minute later, he heard it again, this time from a different direction. It was slow, deliberate. It wasn't the sound of an animal scurrying through the underbrush. It sounded like footsteps, someone trying to walk quietly. "Who's there?" David called out, his voice sounding small in the dense fog. The footsteps stopped again. This went on for what felt like an eternity. A rustle to his left. Silence. A rustle behind him. Silence. He felt like he was being toyed with, stalked by something he couldn't see. He was completely disoriented, unable to tell which way the trail was. Panic sit in. He just picked a direction and started walking, half running through the fog, blindly pushing past branches. He could hear the footsteps behind him, faster now, keeping pace. He didn't dare look back. He stumbled on for what felt like miles, until he burst out of the fog bank and onto a familiar stretch of trail, the sun weakly breaking through the clouds. He looked back into the wall of white, but there was nothing there. The footsteps were gone. He practically sprinted the rest of the way to his car, his terrifying encounter in the fog, a stark reminder of how vulnerable we can be when the wilderness decides to hide its secrets. These stories remind us that while the beauty of autumn is undeniable, the woods hold mysteries that we may never understand. Always be prepared. Let someone know your plans and trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Thanks for joining us for these chilling tales. If you have a scary hiking story of your own, share it in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more strange and mysterious content. Stay safe out there.